Will the clerk please call the meeting to order?
City Council members Brown.
Here.
Hazen.
Here.
Hersey.
Here.
Jacobson. Here. Miller.
Here.
Roberts. Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Okay, next up then will be approval of minutes of previous meeting, May 28th of 2019. Do I have a motion on that?
I'll move approval.
Second.
So Jared approved and,
Wow.
was it Eric?
Mary Ellen.
Sharice.
Take your pick.
Sharice?
Okay.
Sharice will second that. Okay, public input. Oh, I'm sorry. So we had a motion and a second, and then up for discussion, right? Or no? Yes. Up for discussion, Bill Brown.
Changes or
Yeah.
corrections.
Corrections.
Yeah, on the bottom of page 2, in the last paragraph where it says in lieu of the disparities in data, I think it's probably supposed to be in light of the disparities in data.
Okay, so noted
Good.
one change on the bottom of page 2. Any other corrections? Okay, then we'll go ahead and vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed, that stands. And thank you for catching that, Jared. Next up is public input. I'm sorry, additions to the agenda. Am I right? Okay, any additions to the agenda? Nope. Okay, then we'll go to public input. I seem to be anxious to get to public input. Catherine Choate wishes to speak on ambassadors and sneakers. Come on up and pull up to the microphone, please.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Choate, and I've come here tonight to tell you about a program that I will be participating in this summer, in which I will be one of 2 young adults representing Illinois. The program is a transatlantic summer academy on human rights called Ambassadors and Sneakers. Ambassadors and Sneakers was founded and developed by a nonprofit organization known as the German American Institute Tübingen. One of the organization's goals is to improve German-American relations. Ambassadors and Sneakers involves 12 German and 12 American young adults aged 16 to 20, this year chosen from Saxony, Baden-Württemberg, Michigan, and Illinois. This program has the young adults collaboratively learn about human rights from a historical and contemporary perspective. The program also works to promote peace and understanding between youth of Germany and America. The program will achieve this through the young adults spending 2 weeks in Germany, in Berlin and Leipzig, and 2 weeks in the U.S., in Ann Arbor and Chicago. During that time, the young adults will listen to activists and politicians speak, and we will visit places that have significance to human rights. When school resumes in August, I will use the insights I gleaned from my experiences in Ambassadors and Sneakers to positively influence my decisions and actions in the service organizations I'm involved in, which are Habitat for Humanity, National Honor Society, and Key Club. Thank you to Mayor Marlin for her support of my application, and thank you all for allowing me this time to present. I know that human rights are important in Urbana.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Catherine? Eric?
I'm also looking forward to going to Leipzig this summer to visit my granddaughter, who's a student at the university there. So
Oh, cool.
I guess Leipzig is attractive.
Sharice?
Yeah. So when you come back, are you going to give us an update on what
Yes.
things are, how they are there,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a comparison, contrast type of thing?
Yes, I intend to.
That would be nice. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Guess not. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And do we have any other public input? There's just the one. Guess it was just the one. All right, looks like we've got a presentation from Champaign County Economic Development Corporation. Don Elmore. Come on up, sir.
Thank you.
Let me find a USB port here. That HDMI, oh. No. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you. You may have expected Carly McCrory, and I am clearly not Carly. She is off in D.C., again, doing her best on behalf of Champaign County on various topics. She was there last week as well, so I'm going to stand in for her. I've been asked to try to keep it to about 10 minutes, so I'll do my best. She did most of the presentation. I added some SBDC items, so you can take a look at the specifics. But first of all, is who is the EDC and what do they do? And most of you are familiar with the organization, but she found a good quote from the Illinois Economic Development Corporation. Economic development is the intentional practice of improving a community's economic well-being and quality of life, and that's sums it up pretty well. There have been a lot of changes, sort of in approaches in economic development and so forth in about the last 3 or 4 years, especially where it comes to talent, acquiring talent, keeping talent. So under workforce development, which is one of the main things that the EDC is involved with, this continues to get more and more attention. We'll talk about that, or I will, in the presentation a little bit farther along. Business outreach is another really important aspect of what the EDC does, and so that could involve visiting companies, again, on business retention, could be talent acquisition, it could be marketing, so forth, and they conduct a lot of visits. Also, there are RFPs. Companies are moving, they want to build, they want to come here, keeps them very busy. So, and I think
I'll flip your slides for you. How's that?
oh, thanks. Oh, I can do it.
Okay.
I did. Okay, sorry. Right, so more RFPs, outreach visits, of course, and one of the big things that's been going on is this, the ICAT, or the, excuse me, the, our relationship with Parkland for education and this forklift operators. I mean, this came about demand from the community. This is an area where we can't hire people, and so it's common for us to work with Parkland on areas there. There ended up only being 4 participants in the program that ensued, but 7 employers visited, 5 donated materials. All of the participants had interviews, and Carly followed this up and said she thought all of them had ended up getting hired. So, and we'll have a video to follow up on that later. Okay, programs and events. Of course, Champaign County First, which is going on this week. Carly's going back out to do that. That's a group of local leaders, public and private. I think the mayor may have a good 30-ish, I think.
I'll be there tomorrow.
You'll be there tomorrow? And it's a large and has been, in my opinion, a very, very effective and influential group. And so we also do things, or the EDC does things like Tech Mix and Catalyze networking opportunities. 2 that I'm involved with at the bottom, I won't go through all of them, but the iVenture Accelerator. We not only work with the iVenture cohort, but also host socials that allow them to get out in the public and meet people. Those have been very successful as well. We did one already this spring. First Friday is a group of local stakeholders, I guess you'd say, some from the venture capital community, other business owners, lenders, educators, that meet and see companies that are they're making pitches and describing what their businesses, usually new businesses, are doing, but they get the opportunity to just ask questions from this group. And we find it very interesting. I've belonged to this group for probably close to 20 years, and it's gone through a little bit of evolution, but very successful and helpful, I think, to these companies. Oh, and so she added some pictures that I haven't seen in the presentation until now. But okay. ICAT, yes, the apprentice program, and ICAT is the Industry Consortium for Advanced Technical Training. It's based in Chicago, but again, it's something that we work on with the Early College and Career Academy, which is more local, and high school juniors and seniors can earn credits towards a diploma in college, but they're working with local businesses in key areas, and those areas, let's see, does she have a video? I guess she does have a video. So I think it's worth mentioning again what those categories were, because it kind of went by quickly. It's automotive technology, collision repair, computer networking, computer programming, criminal justice, health professionals, and industrial technology with machining, welding, design, sort of we call precision manufacturing here. And several of those I know, particularly automotive tech, healthcare still, and industrial technology are in great demand. You know, we mentioned before the forklift operators, so those are very important. Oh, innovation celebration. Let me go back one. This is kind of what we call our tech Oscars or innovation Oscars. The 14th annual one was recently at Parkland. You have 21 finalists and 9 awards in 9 different categories. And included in that group, so friends from Urbana were Matt Cho, who won the Economic Development Impact Award for reasons too numerous to mention. We work with Matt a lot. But there were 3 other businesses from Urbana that were finalists in their respective categories, and one was James Langer from Sirionics, which was for management. He was nominated for management. HexNest, which is now in CoLab, one of the student startups or new startup category, and the Urbana-Champaign Independent Media Center, excuse me, were all finalists in their respective categories. Made in Champaign County, this is another one of the initiatives that the EDC puts together, and of course it's promoting exactly what it says, the companies and products that come out of the county. In the works is planning for the National Manufacturing Day, which is the first Friday in October, which will include tours of local companies, etc. Fly Champaign, iFlyCU. This has been very important. There's economic impact numbers and job numbers. We have a route to Charlotte through American. And the Fly Local Pledge is very interesting, and 20-plus companies have pledged to date, including the city of Urbana. And it reads, by signing the pledge, you can commit to, when making air travel decisions for our company and its employees, we will always consider flying in and out of CMI first. We will always consider the overall expense of business travel when making air travel decisions for our organization. Such costs include employee travel time, automobile reimbursement, parking fees, and time savings that frequently takes to get through security at CMI versus other airports. And I can speak as a frequent flyer. I almost don't do these calculations anymore and just automatically fly out of here. There, for me personally, just too many advantages, so I believe strongly in this program and our airport. Your Welcome CU, obviously, is another initiative that's gotten a lot of attention. The Heart of Innovation water tower, if you've seen it recently, and we made it to a calendar. I had economic development person from Springfield who visited last week and said, who's responsible for that? And so it's noticed. And a little bit more about the campaign. These are just some of the things that the EDC does under the You're Welcome banner. So there is a website, obviously, jobs, social media is very, very active. We have videos that are available and other kinds of print and collateral. We do some paid media, and we have a resources directory. Here some examples of some of the things that we've done, gathering up the communities rankings, which seem to be coming fast and furiously these days. Best Midwest Food Town. We have some, particular restaurants that have made these kind of lists as well. The MTD, more than 12 million riders in 2016 and 17. And that was more than Rockford, Indianapolis, and Nashville. So kind of for a comparison, this is the kind of information that we want to get out under the You're Welcome heading. Okay, a couple of slides just about the SBDC, and again, I think most of you are kind of familiar with what it is that we do, but it's no cost, confidential business advising of all kinds. Everybody's different. About half of my clients are startups. That's sort of a perception that we're a place only for startups to go, and that's not true. We work with established companies. It's just usually with different topic areas. Training seminars and workshops, we did a total of almost 100 last year. We're probably on pace to do that many. We did 24 in May alone because it was National Small Business Week, and we had some other things going on. We have an international trade center for clients who import or export. One of the really, really strong benefits is that our international trade specialist, Mariel Wasanga, is especially good at helping companies get STEP grants, which are, funding opportunities when they want to travel to trade shows to either establish relationships, discover markets, sell products. Let's see, PTAC services. The Procurement Technical Assistance Center is good for primarily two things. If you're a business that can be certified as a minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned, etc., that's the place to go. Talk to Kelly Kruger-Hura, who can really accelerate that process for you. It can be quite a slog if you try to take that on by yourself. And then, of course, once you're certified, what does that do for you? And Kelly can help you get set up for bid matching and the system for award management and the university, and so that you're connected to the resources that show the opportunities that you have. Here's some data that I just collected, and I want to thank Will Kolszowski, who's also not here, for helping get this information together very, very quickly. This is all about clients in Urbana. So currently, we have 271 Urbana clients, and we counseled 83 of them last year and this year to date. Of those, and I want to point out the columns got a little bit tight. That's not 185 expansion grants. In 2018, we had 18 business development grants that went out. 5 of them were expansion, 13 were business development, more for specifically for new businesses. And in 2019 so far, there have been 12 grants, and 2 of those have been expansion grants, with a total of about $75,000 over the last year and a half, basically, that have gone out for these grants. And it's at the point now where if there is a business in the areas that are served by this grant, the chances are really, really high that they've taken advantage of this program. It's a good program, and I like being involved with it, and I'm happy to do it. There's been some questions in the past couple of meetings, interest in demographics and diversity for Urbana clients. And so I asked about some of that and gathered some just proactively. And so you can see that the percentages of male and female-owned businesses and joint are there. And for diversity, we've got about 24% of all the clients are minority-owned small businesses. And it's important to note that because of how they report, you're not sure exactly what that number is, because in Urbana, for instance, you have a higher Asian American population than African American population, and unfortunately the Asian American businesses are much more difficult to record, because our CRM system, which we get from the state, doesn't really allow us to do that. We can do it for African American clients, we can do it for Hispanic clients, can't do it for Asian American clients. And in a lot of communities, you know, that's not as high a percentage, but here it's very significant. It's almost 20%. So I just wanted to make that point. Here is some about the business types. You know, the column with the larger numbers, of course, is for all 271 clients who are based in Urbana, and I also included the types of businesses that the grant funds were going to, and this for last year and so far this year. So you can see arts and entertainment is heavily represented, but you know, that covers a lot of areas. I should also point out that if I had the ability to do it, there are several businesses, probably more than several in Urbana, that could fit in multiple categories. It may be you know, arts and entertainment, but also have kind of a health or a professional service aspect, things like that. So I wouldn't say this is misleading, but just that it doesn't tell the whole story. I brought some copies of who these businesses actually are because of confidentiality. I don't want to share that in a public meeting, but if any of you would like to have a copy, that was just provided to me by your planning department earlier today, and I would be happy to share that. Some things that are in the works. This is our recent, the graphic is from our strategic planning exercise, which consisted of 2 different meetings facilitated. You may recognize the work of David Michael Moore for the facilitation of this strategic planning. The areas we're going to be focusing on, business outreach and industry engagement, workforce development, regional promotion and talent attraction, transportation and logistics, small business development, and regional collaboration. And I know this is a little bit difficult to pick up just from here, but trust me, it's about 15 feet wide, and it's a very, very effective way to go. On the subject of small business development, I would just like to make the point that in the context of economic development, small businesses represent well over 90% of what economic development really is. So I'm very fortunate to be hosted by an economic development corporation, because our mission and our priorities dovetail really, really well. A couple of the other things that are going on, we just embarked and started meeting about having a coding boot camp and academy. The Ag Tech marketing campaign, this is a big, big deal both for the community and the university, a real focus on agricultural technology. Export Tech is a certification program that Marielle, our international trade specialist, is going to offer here, train for it, and then offer here for other international trade specialists in our network, but also for individuals from private companies can come and get you know, CEU accredited training. We're going to work on an entrepreneurship coaching academy at the Douglas Branch Library with the Champaign Public Library and another an Urbana-based local entrepreneurship and career education training business called Lincoln and Hill Training, and we're very excited about that as well. Okay, and that's it. Other than I have to point out that Carly made my face even rounder than it is normally, so I just had to point that out. Anyway, thanks very much for your time. I know you're voting on continuing to fund the EDC, and I hope you do so, and I will certainly stick around for that one, but we'll take any questions now if you have them.
Any questions? Mary Alice?
I was wondering if you had any numbers in terms of the percentage of Urbana High students that take some of your dual credit programs that participate?
I don't, unfortunately, no. That is an EDC stat and not an SBDC stat, and so if it wasn't provided for me tonight, I don't have it.
Gotcha.
But if you'd like it, we can certainly
Yeah, I
get it.
think that would be
Okay.
great to be able to provide. Thank you.
Okay.
Sharice?
Yes. I was wondering, something I've been trying to get going with coordinating with the district, well, not with District 116, but with the high school. Do you have any kind of programs that train electricians, plumbers, carpenters, anything like that?
We don't directly, but
Or with Parkland?
with Parkland, and that I think that would be probably the ECCA program, and it's actually the couple of examples that I've seen. It's a really effective process. I mean, if you reach out and say there's a demand for this between with our network, whether it's us and or Parkland and or the school districts, we'll try to figure out how to do that if the programs don't already exist. And I have to admit, I don't know. There may be some already.
Okay. Thank you.
Eric?
What relationship do these kinds of programs have with the relevant trade unions?
It's a good question. I don't know. Some of the trade unions may have their own, and if that's the case, I'm just not aware of it.
Yeah, I get the context of the
Okay.
question is that if these programs are, pathways to union apprenticeships,
Mm-hmm.
which is typically a pathway to, pretty good middle-class job.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, in my mind, and I think would be a plus.
Okay. If I had to venture an opinion, I would say that as these job training programs, especially in those kind of trades where, unions are a big part of that workforce, that these entities that are working on them are definitely talking to them.
Any other questions? I guess that's it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. And then next, we're going to have staff report, if there is any. It looks like there is.
Good evening, Libby Horowitz, Economic Development Coordinator, here with the Business and Development Report for the month. It's a long one this month, and you're going to get to hear me later as well for a bit longer, so I apologize. So first off, the Urbana Landmark Hotel. The city has entered into a letter of intent and interim agreement with Maryland-based Marksons Affiliates, LLC, to renovate the Urbana Landmark Hotel into a 120-room boutique hotel, restaurant, bar, and conference center, and that's with the Hilton Tapestry branding. The project would be a minimum of $16.8 million, with the city providing the developer with at least $5.2 million in reimbursements based on new revenue generated. There's been a lot of downtown activation this year as well, this month as well, with the Urbana's Downtown Get Down premiere. I hope a lot of you were able to come out. The event had an estimated over 800 attendees, which is quite great for the first event. And the event featured live DJs, concerts, artists, street market, kids zone, teen maker lab, inflatables, games, live arts demos, performances, and community corner. This was the first of 4 events, so you still have a chance to get out to more of them. And the next one's going to take place on June 22nd. That event has a lot of great partnerships, which is one of the strengths of it, with the Urbana Public Arts Program, Urbana Public Arts and Culture Program, Urbana Park District, 40 North, 88 West Champaign County Arts Council, the Urbana Free Library, and the Urbana Business Association. There's also some major demolitions that are quite exciting this month. A demolition has begun on the former Goodyear building to make way for the Green Street townhome building. That was after 3 RFPs and after 10 years of trying to get that, and so it's pretty exciting to see that building coming down. Also, demolition has begun for the Gather 5-story apartment complex on the southeast corner of Lincoln and University Avenues, and demolition for the 1301 East Washington building has completed. Cunningham Avenue construction, there's also a large project going in there with the JX Peterbilt Truck Center. And the center will specialize in truck repair and sales of parts. And they are relocating and expanding and will be adding new employees. There are a few business closings that were not written in the report. I apologize. That was Collider Co-working. I believe the owner got a new job and so has closed that. Courage Connections has closed in Lincoln Square Mall to focus on their mission. That's not the center, that is their resale shop that is closed. And it was announced today, I think, in the paper that Little Porgies will be downsizing and closing their Urbana. Also another new business that's not mentioned in the report, 83 Vietnamese Cuisine opened in Broadway Food Hall. Also, other downtown space build-outs, the Magic Needle, which is a sewing and alteration business, relocated from 813 West University to make way for the new Gather building, to 302 South Race, which is a building owned by the Urbana Free Library. Record Swap announced they will relocate from their location at 114 East University in Champaign to Lincoln Square Mall. And they actually mentioned specifically in the News Gazette that part of that was because of new businesses in Lincoln Square, such as the Idea Store, Common Ground Food Co-op, and Art Co-op, along with other live music venues in downtown Urbana. 2 buildings with prior TIF redevelopment agreements also continued to reactivate. That would be a salon on the ground floor of the Stevens building adjacent to Wicked Rascal, and work is continuing on a Japanese restaurant at the Cohen building, which is 135 West Main. A few of these events already happened. I like to put those in there because you get them when you email out. But some upcoming events, June 19th from 4 to 4:30 will be a ribbon cutting for Billy Joe Hart Photography at 122 West Main. June 22nd from 5 to 8 will be the second Urbana's Downtown Get Down. June 23rd from 3 to 4, there's a Young Art Studio. And on June 25th, from 7:30 to 9, Urbana Business Association will be having a Connections Over Cocktails. I did want to point out that there was over $3.72 million in completed projects this month with Carl, Plastic Container, Stone Creek Church, and U-Haul. Additionally, while single-family housing permits are down in Urbana, they're also down, actually, we do keep data on regional, they're down regionally and down nationally as well. But total square footage added year-to-date is much higher than previously. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? Eric?
Just a comment, I'm really delighted, this is sort of old news in a way, really delighted to see, the project, how the project has taken shape, and is taking shape at the, that we see at the northwest corner of University and Lincoln. However, I wish I could see it better if all those billboards weren't in the way, so I hope something's going to happen to make that happen.
Nice one.
Charisse?
And I know that this particular other event is not necessarily a Urbana City event, but the city will have a table at the Jetty Roads Day on, which is also on the 22nd of June.
Yes, and so it'll be Jetty Roads Day, go out to that, and then also the stage will be traveling to the Urbana Downtown Get Down, so go to both events. They scheduled them together purposefully so that you could go out to both and have sort of a long day-long celebration.
Nice long Saturday going from King Park and off of Lincoln to downtown Urbana and get your get down going.
Mayor?
I would just like to wish Libby Horowitz the best in her new position. She is returning home to Philadelphia to take a new job, and under her leadership in that of economic development, these reports have gotten longer and longer each month. So we appreciate all the work you've done for the city over the last 4 years and wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm here for the next 3 resolutions, so I'll stay seated here. Yes, thank you.
All finished up?
Yes.
Okay, any other staff reports? Okay. Next on, resolution number 2019-06-017R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement, Champaign County Economic Development Corporation, fiscal year 2019-2020, community development.
Yes, thank you. There are 3 different resolutions going forward tonight. There's going to be EDC, UBA, and VCC. Just as a reminder, EDC presented tonight. They did both their reporting and their presentation tonight. UBA and VCC both did their reporting and presentation last week that you saw. So I'm going to do those one by one, but just wanted to say that up front. So the first one that the City Council is being asked to consider is a resolution adopting an economic development agreement for funding EDC. The contribution would remain at $28,763. EDC enables the county to work at a regional level towards economic development. Their activities include technical support to local businesses through the SBDC, and as Dawn mentioned, the SBDC partners with the city to provide business counseling to business grants. So that's all of our business and development grants that we give. The majority of them go through the SBDC counseling. They are required to have counseling. And through the SBDC, we're able to outsource that to them. They also have the International Trade Center, ITC. They promote local manufacturers through the Made in Champaign County program. They highlight regional creative talent by organizing the annual innovation celebration, and they support growth of regional airport with the iFly CU campaign. Additionally, they promote the region as a home of creative talent to young professionals through the Welcome to CU marketing campaign. EDC and SBDC provide direct support to the city through support to Urbana's overarching economic development goals. They do this through business visits with major employers to Urbana businesses, business counseling, as I mentioned, confidential consultation with city staff, so when we have questions, we are able to ask them for their expertise. Developer and business lead generation, they will send us leads as well for us to follow up on. Coordination with state agencies and regional public-private coordination. So the proposed agreement includes reporting requirements, including the EDC work plan, EDC budget, annual report on EDC's activities. All of those are attached. The agreement would require EDC to make an annual presentation to the mayor and city council, as they did tonight. The EDC embarked on a strategic planning process in 1819 to update the organization's missions and goals. And that process is ongoing and expected to last approximately 6 months and will offer the opportunity for the city to provide input and feedback into the priorities of the organization. Currently, Urbana's Economic Development Manager, Brandon Boyes, serves as the city's representative on the EDC board and will serve as chair for FY 1920. The EDC will also work to establish 3 new advisory committees that'll focus on workforce development, facilitation, business industry engagement, and regional promotion. For fiscal impacts, the $28,763 sponsorship for fiscal year 1920 is included in the proposed city budget for the general fund. The City Council has the following 3 options with respect to the proposed agreement: to approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute the proposed agreement as presented, approve the resolution with changes, understanding that any changes must be agreed to by the EDC, or deny the resolution. Staff recommends that the City Council approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute the proposed agreement.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
I move approval of the agreement.
Moved by Eric,
Just send to council with a recommendation for approval?
Oh, I'm sorry. I move to send this agreement to the council with a recommendation for approval. Thank you.
I'll second that.
and second by Mary Alice. Any discussion? Mary Alice.
So I'm curious, why the very specific amount, $28,763?
I am not sure. Brandon had worked that out, I believe.
It's a very specific amount.
It sounds like a formula for a certain percentage of something.
So it would be great if we could know if that is based on a formula, and if that formula, what that formula is for city council meeting before we vote.
Okay.
I
I
think
will
you
look
you
into
might
that.
have an answer behind you. No.
I will look into that for you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're ready to go ahead and vote then. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that resolution stands. All right, resolution, did you have something?
It goes forward to the council to be voted on.
Oh, I'm sorry, goes forward to the council to, how do you say it? Just to
Be voted on.
To be voted on.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it takes me a few times to get back in the groove here.
To be considered and voted on.
To be considered. All right. Yeah, resolution number 2019-06-018R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement, Urbana Business Association, Community Development.
Yes, thank you. The City Council is asked to consider a resolution adopting a one-year promotional and marketing agreement for funding UBA, the Urbana Business Association. The total amount budgeted for UBA in the next fiscal year's budget, excluding Sweet Corn Festival, is $57,815. As a reminder, UBA is a 501c6 member-based organization with a mission of serving its members by making Urbana a dynamic place to live, work, and do business. The organization is governed by a board of business and government representatives. I, Libby Horwitz, currently serve as the city representative, and that will change with staffing changes. The UBA currently has 108 dues-paying businesses, with 10 new members having joined to date in 2019. The organization also hosts and supports a variety of events and operates marketing campaigns that benefit the Urbana business community and local economy. As Paris mentioned, in FY 1920, UBA plans to rebrand to focus on marketing, events, and promotion for Urbana businesses, and that's to better serve their members. So UBA's activities have included the Connections networking events. They've also included the Urbana Sweet Corn Festival, the Urbana Uncork Wine Festival, which happened this past weekend, Market in the Square, Downtown Trick or Treating, the Urbana Downtown Get Down, which was a new one they added this year, the Urbana Neighborhood Tours, which they added last year and are doing again this year, and the world's shortest St. Patrick's Day Parade. They also do marketing for the Boneyard Arts Festival, Tour de CU Urbana Grand Prix, or the Urbana Arts Expo, CU Jazz Festival, and the CU Folk and Roots Festival. The proposed resolution and agreement would renew the city's sponsorship of the UBA in the amount of $57,815, and that's consistent with the FY 2020 budget. Funding for the Sweet Corn Festival decreased from $15,000 in FY 1819 to $10,000 proposed in 1920. The proposed agreement also provides for extensive reporting requirements of staff and elected officials, including submittal of the UBA work plan and annual UBA budget attached, as they did last week. UBA would also be required to submit monthly reports on their activities as well as detailed year-end annual report. So the $57,815 sponsorship for the 1920 fiscal year has been provided for in the proposed city budget. And the City Council has the following options with respect to this proposed agreement. Approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute the proposed agreement as presented. Approve the resolution with changes, understanding that any changes must be agreed to by UBA. Deny the resolution, and staff recommends that the City Council approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute the proposed agreement. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move approving this resolution or sending this resolution to the council with a recommendation for approval.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And Bill seconds. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, we have voted to send this to council with a recommendation to approve it. Okay, resolution number 2019-06-019R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement. Visit Champaign County Community Development again.
So the City Council is asked to consider a resolution adopting a one-year promotional and marketing agreement for funding VCC, and the total amount proposed for VCC in the next fiscal year's budget is $10,000, which is unchanged from last year. So VCC is the official tourism destination marketing and management organization, and they promote tourism to Champaign County. VCC's activities have included attracting and assisting in the organization of major events, producing and distributing the annual Champaign County's Visitors Guide, maintaining an informative website, and marketing and promoting regional hospitality-related businesses. According to VCC, these events attract additional visitors to the county and provide financial gain to the city of Urbana through tax revenue, direct spending, and generated payroll. The Gold Partnership is the lowest level that also includes a guaranteed position on the VCC Board of Directors, and the proposed resolution agreement would renew the city's $10,000 gold level sponsorship of VCC. Urbana's Arts and Culture Coordinator, Rachel Lauren Storm, currently serves as the city representative on the VCC Board. The tourism industry provides economic gains to Urbana and Champaign County through visiting tourists who spend money at local restaurants, retail, hotels, and public transportation. And VCC markets Champaign County as a whole, primarily to an audience living 50 miles from the border of Champaign County, including internationally. And those visitors come and visit not just Urbana, but the county as a whole. And so by marketing the county, they also draw people to Urbana. The proposed agreement is identical to the agreement entered into between the city and VCC during FY 18-19, and the $10,000 funding level will result in the recognition of the gold partner level. The proposed agreement requires extensive reporting, including the submittal of the VCC work plan, annual VCC budget, and the currently VCC is operating under their prior year's work plan and budget, so those are attached, but they will provide the city with the updated work plans and budget upon approval by the board. The $10,000 sponsorship for the current fiscal year has already been provided for in the current city budget. There are three options. The City Council can approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute the proposed agreement as presented, approve the resolution with changes, understanding that any changes must be agreed to by VCC, or deny the resolution. And the recommendation is that staff recommends the City Council approve the resolution authorizing the mayor to execute the proposed agreement. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for staff? Mary Alice.
I'd like to make a motion to move forward resolution number 2019-0602R, whoops, sorry, the one 06019R, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of a promotional and marketing agreement with Visit Champaign County, moving forward to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
And second by Jared. Any discussion? Eric.
This commitment has a long, complicated history. But one of the things that I notice at present is that our contribution is small relative to other entities. It's very small compared to the City of Champaign, and proportion to our population, for example, it's smaller than some other entities. I guess I'm just taking note of that. I don't know if this is a question that has a reasonably succinct answer, but does this affect the benefits that we get from our membership?
We do have somebody who serves, so Rachel Lauren Storm serves on the board. So the $10,000, I think, was what was worked out last year as what the city desired to have at that level with, and that's what they wanted. And the agreement does lay out some more specific items that VCC is required to complete with that sponsorship.
Any other questions for staff or discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, that resolution will go to council with recommendation for approval.
Thank you.
All right, our next resolution is 2019-06-020R, resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant for Market at the Square, Farm Credit Illinois Grant, SNAP Double Value Program 2019 Community Development.
Actually, both of the next two items are very similar. One is the Farm Credit Illinois Grant for making the SNAP program benefits double. It's basically for the farm credits to accept a grant of $5,000 from the Farm Credit Illinois awarded which was awarded to support the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, Double Value Program. And basically what happens is a person with a link card can access fresh fruit, fresh local fruits, vegetables, baked goods, food-bearing plants, and they can match up to $25 per day at the market. They can spend that money at the market. And it's a extremely, very similar, almost exactly identical grant for the Link Up Illinois, which is the next item for the same purpose.
Any questions for staff? Mary Alice?
So based on the memorandum on the LINK grant, it says during the 2018 season, Urbana Market at the Square distributed $24,405 in combined SNAP and double value incentives. My question is, did that cover it? Do these grants cover the amount? Do you know if we ran out of funds to double?
To my recollection, we didn't run out. We had a little bit to carry over into this year, so it's being very well used. But anytime we have any to carry over, we expend it pretty quickly, the following year if we can.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead, Jared.
I'd like to move Resolution number 2019-06-020R, a resolution authorizing the acceptance of a grant for Market at the Square for the farm credit. SNAP Double Value Program be sent to the full council with recommendation for approval.
Do we have a
Second.
Second is Sharice. Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Resolution 2019-06-020R has been moved to council with recommendations for approval. Next up, Resolution number 2019-06-021R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant for Market at the Square, Link Up Illinois Grant, SNAP Double Value Program 2019 Community Development, very similar to the last resolution. Yes, Mary Alice.
I'd like to make a motion for the resolution that you just stated, that it be moved to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
And Jared will second that. Any discussion? Sharice?
What is the difference between the link and the farm credit? Is there?
Just different sources, just
Okay.
different grant sources. Farm Credit has been doing this for many years. I think the Link Up Illinois is a different grant funding source. That's the only difference.
Okay, but it's basically the same, for the same type of.
The purpose is the same thing, to double the value of somebody, so that, there's been discussion for years that a lot of times people who receive Link assistance can't afford to purchase fresh foods at the farmer's market or anywhere else for that matter. So it's an opportunity to avail them of this
Okay,
this
thank you.
service.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No one's opposed. That will go to the full council with recommendations for approval. Yes, clerk.
Mr. Chair, council members, we haven't used the consent agenda approach in some time, but the 5 previous resolutions, the 3 agreements, and these 2 SNAP ones are perfect for a single unanimous vote under a consent agenda, if you would like to do that next week.
Okay. Do we need to vote to do that, or how do we proceed?
It'd be good to get a sense of the council, yes.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'd move to place the first 5 items, resolutions number 2019-06-017R through 021R, to the consent agenda for the next city council meeting.
I'd second that.
Okay, moved by Bill, second by Jared. So we will put that on the consent agenda at the
You need a vote?
I think we need a
full council meeting.
voice vote.
Need a voice vote.
Voice vote? Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Stop laughing at me.
I-
Yes, Eric?
I do have a question. Some of these involve sort of contractual agreements. Are they eligible for a voice vote, or must there be roll call?
Yes, yeah, it's a roll call regardless, yeah. And all of these call for, all 5 of these agreements have a roll call vote. They don't require the mayor's vote.
Okay.
And, yeah, but they do involve unanimous consent to proceed.
Okay, and I got a couple of public input cards that came in that I'll read off. The elderess Melinda Carr wishes to say that she has continued concerns about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer issues, equity, and historic impact. Item 17, resolution number 2019-0602R, a resolution adopting financial policies 2019, bullet number 6, reference to Dr. Ellis subdivision. Get all that correctly? Okay, thank you. Also, Bishop King James Underwood, still concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problems. Okay, we'll move on to our next resolution, an ordinance number 2019-06-033, an ordinance amending the Urbana City Code, Chapter 22, recycling tax. Finance Office.
Good evening, Chris Francisco, Financial Services Manager. I'm actually going to be speaking about the ordinance amending the recycling tax and the resolution for the intergovernmental agreement with the sanitary district for billing services, because they kind of both go hand in hand. So the first thing that I wanted to do was note that the amendment doesn't increase the tax rate, but only changes the way the recycling taxes are billed. The fee for residential and multifamily recycling tax would remain at $3.25 a month per unit, and the dormitory rooming house fee would remain at $2.51 per month per residential occupancy. The recycling tax is deposited into the recycling fund and pays for recycling and related services. Because our current recycling billing system will no longer be supported, we evaluated several different options for billing the recycling tax. Staff believes it is less costly and more efficient to allow the sanitary district to bill the recycling tax on behalf of the city rather than purchase a new billing system. The district already bills our sewer benefit tax and stormwater utility fee and would use those procedures for billing the recycling tax. The district would charge the city 3% of billed revenues, which we estimate would be significantly less than annual licensing fees if we were to purchase a new software system. So the recycling taxpayers would notice that the billing cycle will be bi-monthly instead of quarterly or annually. They will still have several payment options with the sanitary district, including online bill payment. However, the sanitary district offers automatic payment withdrawal, which is a feature the city currently does not offer, and it's a feature that is frequently requested by our taxpayers. The district's bill would clearly identify which charges are district charges and which charges are city charges. If approved, the city would send a final bill in November for services through the end of the year. Information about the billing changes would be included with that bill. The district would begin billing for services January 1st, 2020. With the change in the billing, to keep costs manageable, we wanted to limit the number of reasons we would make adjustments to those listed in the council memo. We believe it is more efficient and cost-effective to not make a lot of small adjustments. Because we bill retroactively, we have already paid the contractor based on the number of dwelling units. Therefore, when we make small adjustments, the cost of the recycling program is eventually spread out to everyone else who pays the tax. In addition, the staff cost to make small adjustments is generally more than the cost of the benefit to the resident, since the cost per dwelling unit is only $3.25 a month. I can take any questions if you have those.
Okay, any questions for staff? Mary Alice.
So I'm really happy to see that people will have more options in terms of how to pay this. Will it be a separate bill, or will it be all rolled in with the line item?
It
with the
will
sewer?
be one bill from the sanitary district with your sanitary sewer charges on it, the stormwater fee, the sewer benefit tax, and the recycling.
So you're just going to pay one bill, but you'll see line item exactly
Right,
what goes to
right.
what
They
fund.
will all be clearly identified on the
And
bill.
then you have one
payment.
Okay,
One bill, one
that is
payment.
awesome. I
Yes.
really, really like that.
I agree. I think people will enjoy that.
I guess my only question here is the change in the policy in terms of when you do not have to pay it. All right, so right now, there's a process that if I'm reading it correctly, because I was reading through the strike-throughs in the actual policy, If you contact the city and your dwelling has been vacant for a year, you can be retroactively given your money back. Is that correct? Or that was a little confusing to me, but regardless, I think the policy was that if your building or house had been vacant for a year and you could prove it, then you didn't have to pay the recycling tax for that year.
Well, and not only that, we were also doing adjustments if your house was vacant for a month. So people that went to Florida for 3 months, we were making adjustments for those. So we'd like to discontinue that because it's really not cost-effective to do those small adjustments.
So in the actual, here it is, it says, if the dwelling unit is not inhabited during the entire calendar, month, I'm sorry,
Yes.
you are correct.
Right.
The no tax shall be due for that calendar month. I mean, I understand that it's a small amount. It's about $3, roughly speaking, per
$3.20, yeah.
month.
Mhm.
I hesitate, however, I don't think we should do it every month, but I'm wondering if council would consider a 6 month or 1 year vacancy, because you're not going to be paying the garbage collector if you don't have anybody living there for an entire entire year. And I don't know if it's really fair for us to be charging for a service that's not being used.
I do want to point out that currently people are billed in arrears, so they're paying after we've already delivered the service. So when we're not notified in advance, the city's still paying for that service. Whether anybody's living there or not, the hauler who does this work on behalf of the city is still showing up to make the collection and still sending us a bill for it. So somebody's paying for that regardless, whether we adjust it or not.
Sharice?
I just want to say, okay, so is there a recommendation or a way that we can recommend that instead, I understand you said the small thing, if they're not there for a month, because it's still going to take however much money it's going to take to find that and cross it out and send back a check and all the processing fees, as much as it would cost to process. So is there a way that a person can get like what they do at the post office? I'm not going to be here for 3 months, or I'm not going to be here for a month. Please cut off my service.
I'm not going to say it's not possible. We could probably find a way. I am going to say, I think, and this goes back many, many years when this program was started, it was set up as a tax, not a fee. It's not an optional service, I think, because we want to encourage people to recycle. So essentially, we'd be making it easy for people to just opt out.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't, if somebody calls us and says, well, I'm not going to be here, we don't know whether they're there or not. We'd have to set up a process with Public Works where they contact the hauler and say, okay, now don't stop at this address for this period of time and make that pickup, and then, call them back and restart it at some point. I guess it's possible. But I
Okay.
mean, it is a tax. It's not a fee, so.
Okay.
Eric, did you have a question?
Yeah, I favor what's the document before us without adjusting for that. It adds a whole lot of complexity. The convenience, it puts some loopholes into the idea of mandatory recycling, and for only a marginal benefit to a few people. So I think we ought to pass this as it is.
Bill?
So currently, if a multifamily property of, say they have 200 apartments and 10% vacant, they could file annually to get a rebate on those 20 vacant apartments. That would be, maybe $700 or $800, something like that.
Currently, we don't make adjustments for multifamily buildings that are not completely vacant. So the whole building
Okay.
has to be
So a
vacant before.
complex would, so they'd have to have a whole building that was completely vacant
Right.
before, so.
And it's very
So
rare
this
that
is
we
really
make
no
that
change
adjustment.
for them.
Pardon?
This would really be no change for them?
Yeah, it would not affect multifamily buildings.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
I move sending this resolution to full council with a recommendation for approval.
Okay, moved by Eric, second.
A second.
Sheckham, second by Sharice. Any discussion? Bill?
Just, do you know if, I know the sanitary district has a kind of bizarre way of reimbursing themselves for some of their billing through charges like $1 or $2, depending on how many times you're billed during the year. And you can avoid all that by just signing up for the direct deposit, direct deduction out of your checking account. But for people that don't have checking accounts, they tend to get the bill every 2 months and then have to pay that $1 fee or something. Do you know if this will change how much that fee will be for their collecting this additional amount? Would it change the $1 fee to make it a $1.50 fee or anything like that?
I'm not sure, but I would say probably not.
Okay.
I would assume the fee would be the same whether you're getting 5 items on there or just 1 item.
Okay. Yeah, I gave up on, you can also pay it far in advance and try to estimate, a year's worth of usage. I used to do that, and I kind of gave up because we started adding the extra taxes to it, so it would go through it faster. And I just caved in and did the direct deduction from my checking account, and I've been really happy with that.
Okay, no other discussion, right? Jared?
Not a discussion, just a point of order that Carol thinks that we had a motion made to a resolution and not the ordinance, so we need to also vote on the ordinance. We can still vote on this resolution because it's the same topic, but we also need to make a vote on the ordinance. They were made out of order, Dean.
Oh. You mean they were
So-
listed on here out of order?
No, not listed, just motioned out of order.
Okay.
Aha.
Eric made a motion on 13, when really he meant to do it on 12, so we still need to vote on 12.
May I amend my motion to approve, to send ordinance number 2019-06-033 to full council with recommendation for approval?
I will second that motion to amend the original motion.
Okay, so Eric amended his original motion. Jared seconded that motion. And we'll go ahead and vote on that again. Is that correct, clerk? Or I'm like lost on.
Why don't you withdraw your motion and start
withdraw your
over?
motion and start over.
Okay.
Start from scratch.
Okay, at the mayor's suggestion, I will withdraw my motion and sit back and sulk.
No, you can do your ordinance. You can move the ordinance now. if you
Oh,
wish.
now I can move my ordinance. Okay. So I move that we send ordinance number 2019-06-033 to the full council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
There you go.
Okay, moved by Eric correctly, seconded by Sharice correctly. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, ordinance number 2019-06-033 has been sent to the full council with recommendations for approval. We're going to hit 13. All right, thank you. Resolution number 2019-06-022R, resolution approving intergovernmental agreement with the Urbana and Champaign Sanitary District for billing services. Finance.
So this is really part of the package with the one that we just discussed. This is, the second part of it is just authorizing the mayor to execute the intergovernmental agreement to make this happen.
Okay, and do we have any questions for staff? Mary Alice?
I'd like to make a motion that we move forward resolution number 2019-06-022R, resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the Urbana-Champaign Sanitary District for billing services to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mary Alice, second by Jared. Any discussion? No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Resolution number 2019-06-022R has been sent to full council with recommendation for approval. Next up, ordinance number 2019-06-034, an ordinance approving the fiscal year 2019-2020 annual budget finance.
All right, so this ordinance would approve the annual budget, and so generally, it's consistent with the proposed budget document that you received earlier. However, there is a specific list attached to the ordinance of changes that are recommended. So what we're asking is that you send the ordinance to council for approval, including this list of changes that's attached. Just a few points here. There are some adjustments to property tax revenues based on the 2018 property tax levy extension. This is a little complicated because the OSF properties were actually included in the taxing value, even though we believe the state has authorized an exemption for them. So we're going to see more revenue, but on the other side, we're just going to transfer that money into our general reserve fund because we think in all likelihood we may have to pay that back at some point. A few other adjustments to revenues, including one for traffic citations, a decrease of $100,000, and this has to do with some magic that happened at the state that changed how revenue from those violations is distributed by the county and what portion of that actually goes to local governments. In the capital improvement fund, we added an upgrade to outdoor warning sirens, some changes related to capital improvement and using some CDBG funding for capital improvements. So the list is longer, but many of them are small and probably fairly inconsequential.
Any questions for staff? Sharice?
Could you give a better explanation, I suppose, regarding the bullet point portion of neighborhood infrastructure improvements, $105,000. We discussed it earlier, and I was wondering if you could, just for the record, give a better description.
Yes,
or
it's
explanation.
confusing, so I will do my best.
Yeah, because I was totally confused when I was trying to read it too.
So in the capital improvement fund, we did have some money for various local street improvements, and we also had a charge for IT services, which we do for all our programs across the city, because there was an issue with the grant funds getting close to the cap that they could spend on administrative costs. The grant manager came to us and suggested that we do a little bit of a switch where we allocate some of the CDBG money to capital improvements, and then we pay those administrative charges out of the general fund, which we did, and I'm sure Craig is here to talk a little bit more about the specifics of what's going to happen in Dr. Ellis subdivision.
Yeah, we plan on doing quite a bit of work up there. What we see up there is a lot of curb ramps that need work, sidewalks that need work, some pavement that needs restoration. So we are going to use our supplemental engineering consultant to prepare plans and try to get work going either this fall or next spring.
Okie dokie. That really helps me. Thank you very much, because I just wanted to understand how that was working, and I know that some of my constituents wanted to know as well. So.
Yeah, and I would say it's more money than $105,000 total.
Okay.
So it'll be pretty extensive work.
Okay, so yeah, and I know there are a few roads that definitely need some.
Right.
They're in bad shape.
Yeah, and how about when we get the scope defined more, we'll keep you informed since that's your ward.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Mary Alice?
Just so I'm clear, there are 3 different separate things in this memorandum, and I just want to make sure I know exactly which one we're talking about. So one is just kind of the discussion and some of the changes that you had identified. That is part of the ordinance, I believe. The second piece is a budget amendment for this current fiscal year, and the third or fourth potentially one are the plans that were presented last.
Right, yeah, there are four. There's an ordinance approving next year's budget, an ordinance amending the current budget, a resolution approving the capital improvement plan, and a resolution approving the financial policies.
Okay, so just so I don't hog all the time here, I'm wondering, we're just talking about the actual budget right now?
Yes.
Right, that's okay.
Correct.
So my question, or perhaps it's not even a question, we had conversations about how to bring forward large development projects in the future, and one of the proposals from Planning Department was to add in a temporary half-time planner to assist with that process. I believe it would be appropriate at this time then to offer that, since it is part of the 2020 annual budget. And I believe the recommendation was to decrease the amount that we were putting in the transfer to the retained risk fund, so the amount would be roughly $24,000.
Yes, it's roughly $24,000.
I would also like to have, I would like to do that, and B, I would like to have a conversation with council members in terms of what is appropriate to do with that amount of time. So I emailed everybody today a letter just kind of on my thoughts about the budget process and the presentations that we had last week. And so basically the staff has said that it would take approximately 90 hours a year in order to have somebody here to present additional material for City Council Committee of the Whole. And so a 50% time person, I just took this from when I worked HR, works 1,040 hours. That's what the university uses. I don't know what the city uses, but regardless, it's very different from 90 hours. And so with that, I wanted to have a conversation in terms of what are some of the things that are most pertinent in people's minds in terms of the planning department and what has and has not been able to be completed. For me, the biggest part, and I make no secret of the fact that I feel that we need a new comprehensive plan. I don't propose that this 50% person can do a comprehensive plan. That's impossible. But what I do propose is that this person lay the foundation in terms of what needs to happen at the city level in order to have it perhaps in fiscal year 2021 or 2022 so that we can get this ball rolling. So what does that mean for the city? What do we need to have in place? And to think about what are the costs? Do we do it in-house? Do we hire consultants outside? So I just like to throw that out there, but I'm absolutely willing to hear from other people. That's what I want you guys to talk about.
Any other questions or comments? Yes,
Can
go
I
ahead.
just mention one thing? We do actually have to have a motion to amend this ordinance so that I can
Sure,
add the
sure.
planner there. So I
Absolutely.
just want to make sure we don't get
Yep,
all caught
yep,
up
yep.
in the details and forget to do that.
Okay, Mayor, go ahead.
I will say we've had internal conversations about what we will task this planner with, and we've asked Lori Pearson, the planning manager, to put together a list of possible items that she sees as ways this person could fit in. We also, revising the comp plan, everyone recognizes that's very important, but as I said, and as I responded back to you, obviously this person isn't going to be able to do that. According to what Lori has told me in the past, that will be a consultant. We simply do not have the staff capacity to do the comp plan overhaul. But Carol has been working more closely with Lori on terms of some of the possibilities, and I think she wanted to fill you in there.
I wanted to share a couple things. One thing in general, I guess I would say, is it's really not the role of the council to task planning staff with specific items in their work plan. So I'm happy to share with you some of the priorities, but they work in teams, and so it will be dependent on which of the more senior planners becomes available to be paired up with this individual. But among the kinds of things that are priorities for planning staff that we think would be of a scope that could possibly we could gain some ground on are evaluating strategies for effectively addressing Airbnbs. That can actually impact our budget next year if we are successful in doing that. Investigating zoning strategies that could help maintain the viability of older housing stock, which is a That's a council priority and has also been talked about. It comes up regularly. Develop a strategy to encourage preservation and economic viability of large sorority and fraternity houses in the R7 zoning district, and also to look at ways to improve the current development regulations to encourage better form and new construction west of Lincoln Avenue. So those are what are some of the more pressing things that this individual may be paired up with a more senior planner to work on.
And we've had a lot of conversation about Airbnb during the course of this budget process, and I kept saying, why can't we do this? And Elizabeth keeps saying, well, it's going to take some research, but Champaign is also working on it. It also is going to take a change in our zoning ordinance, which is why this planner could be very helpful in laying the groundwork for this. So, and Champaign is looking at it as well, so that's certainly at the top of our list.
Any other questions?
Well, I just add to that, in previous plans, they've mentioned downtown design overlay. I have to mention that because Dennis isn't here. So downtown design overlay would probably be something that we'd ask staff to look at. And then also the subdivision ordinance I've talked to planning staff before about that. It's out of date, and 10 years ago, I think we were going to add a complete streets, implement a complete streets policy within the subdivision ordinance, and that hasn't been done yet. So I think both of those are ripe for consideration too.
Okay.
And this person is actually 19 hours a week. Right, sure.
Mary Alice?
So I'd just like to say, you're absolutely right. We don't ask staff to do day-to-day stuff. We call them with questions and clarifications and so forth. One thing we do is when we have a larger item that we'd like to have staff investigate, we do give directions to staff. Certainly we've asked about Uber in the past, we've asked about other things, and we've always been told that there's simply not enough time, there's not enough resources there. So I'm really happy to hear the list that you provided in terms of the initial brainstorming that you guys have thought about. I think a lot of those are certainly in line with some of the times that we've asked staff to do things and they said that they didn't have time, so I appreciate that. So with that, and I recognize that we've moved beyond the questions of staff, and now we really are in the discussion of this amendment. So with that in mind, I will make a recommendation that we move forward ordinance number 2019-06034, an ordinance approving the fiscal year 2019-2020 annual budget with an amendment that we include $24,000 for a temporary planner and remove $24,000 from the retained risk fund. With that, I would like to move the amendment in the ordinance with a recommendation for approval to full council.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, moved by Mary Alice with the modification and second by Jared. Any discussion? Bill?
I guess we're calling it a temporary position, but if they do implement the Airbnb tax and that's enough to cover the half salary, I would favor making it a permanent position because it sounds like we have plenty for that position to do.
Well, this is a one-time transfer, right? It's a one-time.
For this year.
Yeah, so I think when we had talked about the enhanced development process where there's an additional opportunity for council feedback, we talked about piloting it for a year, and that's why, at least initially, this will be a temporary position, and if we keep this person busy and the development process goes smoothly and we can identify additional money to keep them on staff, then your wish may come true.
Okay, and this, just on the development process, we didn't discuss the specifics of that a lot. I think actually our current process, if it's followed, can work. Just I think staff has to make sure that developers don't have the expectation that something's going to pass the first time it comes to council, because we always have the option to defer with just 2 votes. And I think developers need to be aware of that and know that it could take an extra 2 weeks.
Anything else? Yes, Jared.
I don't know how quickly we evaluate staff turnovers, but Carol, have we looked at Libby's position of Economic Development Coordinator? Are we planning to refill that, or have we not analyzed that position yet.
It hasn't been to the Vacancy Review Committee yet.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want to preempt the tribunal's, yes, their evaluation.
Okay, thanks. Elizabeth, I had a couple questions for you. I know you commented briefly in the memo on the state budget measures that have been passed in the spring legislature, but I don't know if folks will hear them. So could you just talk a little bit more about how sales tax implementation, how we receive it from the state, and your take on the implications of the new online sales tax that was approved? That'll go into effect, what, January 1st, correct? 2020?
So the changes in sales tax aren't fully effective until January 1, July 1st, 2020.
Oh, they're not.
So, right, more than a year from now. There's some interim changes that start January 1, 2020, but the full changes are July 1, 2020. And what that really does is it will allow us to collect home rule sales tax based on the destination of where a package is being delivered in some cases. So I don't want anybody to think this applies to everything you buy on the internet, because it most definitely doesn't. For example, if you buy something on the internet that is shipped from a warehouse elsewhere in Illinois to your home in Urbana, my understanding is that that purchase will be recorded as having occurred at the location of the warehouse or distribution center versus at the actual destination. There are some cases, certainly, where the sales tax will be recorded at the destination, and that's basically if it's a remote retailer, meaning no physical presence in Illinois, and you're ordering something delivered to Urbana, assuming they meet the threshold requirements to have this kick in, which is 200 transactions or $100,000 in gross receipts. So a very small retailer, it just might never even take place. And then there's marketplace sales by non-Illinois retailers, which also would likely be taxed at the destination. So I just want to be clear. It doesn't mean that everything that gets bought online and delivered to a location in Urbana is going to generate sales tax for the city of Urbana. Some of this revenue we're already receiving through use tax. So there's a portion of the state tax that we're already receiving. So I would expect our use tax is going to go down somewhat. Our sales tax will go up. But I think it was Bill who asked me prior to the meeting about this, and I said, well, it's hard to know what's not there. It's hard to estimate when we don't have any information, basically, about what we're not getting. A couple of other changes. There will be an increase in the local allocation of local motor fuel, or state motor fuel tax, which is a big one because, as you know, we're desperate for money for transportation improvements. Also, the legalization of cannabis gives us the option to impose a local tax, assuming our dispensary opts to participate and sell recreational cannabis, which we don't know yet. There's also a portion of the state revenue from cannabis that will be distributed apparently on a per capita basis to local governments, and I believe that's going to help with some law enforcement functions, specifically drug interdiction, and also dealing with illegal distribution of cannabis. But that's a small piece that's calculated after two other things come off the top, and nobody really knows how much we're talking about.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mayor.
I would add to that, in the overall expansion of gambling opportunities in the state, the legislature also doubled the bet that you can place at video gaming terminals from $2 to $4, and they also allowed up to 6 terminals in an establishment compared to the 5 that's allowed today. So there will be some policy decisions coming before us to change our ordinance if you decide to do that.
Mary Alice.
So I forgot to ask this last time. I apologize, Carol, and I don't know if this is an appropriate question for Carol or for you over there. When you talked about the reorganization of Public Works, there's one thing that I did notice in the personnel summary, which is on page 29, and that is the environmental compliance officer appears to have been shifted from
Yes.
Public Works to Community Development?
Yes.
Is that Jason?
Yes.
Okay, so we have one environmental compliance person, and we have 2/3 of an environmental compliance person in community development. So that's at least what's listed here.
I can help with that.
Oh,
So that position was shifted to CD, but then there were within CD 2 positions that are, where I believe 1/3 or 1/4 of those is allocated to CDBG funds for work that they specifically do in CD target areas, and that is one of those positions. So you will find the other part of that position in the grant fund.
So I'm assuming that we're just kind of right-sizing something, that they'd already been doing the work in areas that would qualify for CDBG funds, and now we're billing that to...
I'm certain they were doing some work in target areas, but whether it was exactly that proportion, I don't know.
CDBG allows for funding of code enforcement activities in target neighborhoods, and that's basically, so what would happen would be what the time that Jason dedicates to that, in addition with the VSIP program, Randy Burgett, the Housing Rehab Coordinator, he is retiring at the end of this year, and Danis is going to pick up some of those activities as much as he can, so that that funding is coming partly, it's going to one of the housing inspectors, and also to fund part of what Jason does in those targeted neighborhoods. In addition, it gives us an opportunity to avoid duplication of services. Sometimes when we get complaints about tall grass and weeds in a vacant house, so Jason would go out and do his inspection, we would go out and do our inspection, each one of us would cite the codes that we managed. So in this case, there's going to be an opportunity for more cross-training so that inspectors can be more efficient when they go out on a problem property.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Bill?
I had a question for Craig on the capital improvement plan. The pavement management system, that's another one of those that has kind of crept up in cost a lot. I remember when we first started talking about it 4 years ago or something, it was $100,000 with a $50,000 annual maintenance, and now it's $265,000 with a $65,000 annual, or not maintenance, annual cost to assess the roads, I guess.
Right.
So is that something that we have and have implemented, or is that something we're still looking for a vendor for, or where is that?
Well, first off, the original 100,000, so the way that we were able to fund this was we had to continually roll funds. So we didn't really get into the game till we got to 150 to 200,000. So it was never projected at 100,000 with 50 annually. It was more always to be around 150 to 200,000. We have selected applied pavement technology through a qualification-based selection, and we have negotiated a contract or a scope of services. We're about ready to enter into a contract with them. The annual amount, though, did go up from 50 to 65, and that's mainly what we have done, though, is we've expanded the scope. So we have now included all of the city parking lots and all of the multi-use paths within the city. That way we have a comprehensive assessment of not just the streets, but everything, all of our flat work that we own.
Okay.
So that's what
explains it.
Yeah, that's what it includes. So that project will start here this summer.
So it's a software system plus a relationship with a contractor, basically?
Yeah, so that what they do is they have a video system. They'll video all of those assets. Some of it is manual, though, like the multi-use paths have to be manually assessed, and some of the parking lots manually assessed. Then they'll set up our pavement management system. We have some software that we have to acquire. that is typical type of software for this. They'll train staff on how to implement that system so that we can do scenario-based type of budgeting, and we can look and say, well, you know, we want a certain set of condition, we want to, what if we had the best? We have a gradation of things that we can do. So, yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
So the cost of software is included in this
Yes.
figure?
And the cost of training staff. The $65,000 annually would be basically 1/3 of the city on an annual basis. This first year, we'll do the whole city, and then after that, it'll be a third from there on out. Does that make
So
sense?
everything will get assessed every 3 years, basically?
Yes, yes.
And the cost doesn't go down as they've covered it like second or third time. They could just, it's like copy and paste, right? You can fill in what's changed.
I wish things worked that easy. But you know, right now, those are budget numbers, you know. I can tell you that the 200,000, the actual scoping is less than 200,000, so.
Okay, so this is like the implementation year, and we'll
Yes.
start seeing results from that pretty soon.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
over the winter period, the goal is then, when we come back to you folks here after the first of the year, we will be talking about what's found and where we go from there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, Mary Alice.
So Elizabeth, I'm going to put you on the spot just because you're sitting in front of me and I'm a little perplexed about something. So I'm just looking at the financial services, so that's page 44. So there's different line items in terms of salaries and benefits, and generally speaking, when I look at these, I look to see if insurance and FICA and RHS and so forth increases or decreases because, of course, that means that we have permanent staff on those funds. That's kind of my process. So if you look between fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020, you have it basically, and I guess somebody can come off of insurance, but you have probably about the same amount here. But if you look at the proposed difference in terms of salary amounts, does that mean that somebody got a large salary increase? There's about, what is that, $10,000, $15,000 more in the salary, or is that a typo? Or it just seems like a pretty large amount.
Yeah, I mean, it is probably a relatively large amount, so there's a lot of things that go into those salary calculations.
Okay.
People get cost of living increases, people get step increases, they get longevity increases. In this case, there was one specific employee whose salary was adjusted because there was a pay equity issue, but it's a combination of all those factors.
So are we still giving longevity?
Currently, we do, yes. Currently, non-bargaining employees receive longevity.
I seem to remember seeing something about that last year, and I thought that there was a line item in the budget that said longevity pay, if I remember correctly.
There used to be in the old chart of accounts, but there is no longer.
There isn't
I mean,
one
that's
now that
really a
we've
salary
transitioned.
item.
So we don't know, like, how much out of the salary. Do we know how much out of all of our salary is being paid in longevity pay?
I could come up with that number, but off the top of my head, no.
I mean, no. I didn't know if we're talking $10,000 or we're talking $100,000. It would.
Oh, across the city?
Yeah.
I would, again, I hate to guess, but I would say more.
More than 100,000.
Yeah, when you look across all the bargaining units, all the non-bargaining staff, yes. And at least one of the bargaining units has a very aggressive longevity schedule.
Yeah, and I'm actually not talking about the bargaining units. I don't want you to do any extra work. I just wanted ballpark, how much are we talking here? How much money? So over $100,000.
I think so, yes.
Okay, all right, that's
Yeah.
all I need. Thank you.
Hey, was there anything else? I think we were in discussion there, right? We're all ready to vote now? Kind of lost track. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, ordinance number 2019-06-034 will go to full city council with recommendations for approval with the modification. Okay, next up, ordinance number 2019-06-035, an ordinance revising the annual budget, ordinance budget amendment number 10, fiscal year 2018-2019 estimates, finance.
All right, so as we do each year, when we adopt the budget, we also amend the current budget to conform to the estimates that we provided to you with the budget. So if you look in your budget book, there's a column that says FY19 estimate. We're amending the budget to match those figures, plus the changes that are listed in the attachment to the budget ordinance, and there are a number of them. Some key things worth noting. There is an additional increase in fire overtime. This is largely driven by a very high level of duty injuries this year. There are some significant costs related to cleanup from the May 26 tornado that touched down in South Urbana. We estimated as much as 1,000 hours of overtime, as well as additional costs for disposal of yard waste at the LRC, and then some stump removal is in there as well for about 96,000. And then some, the other revisions are pretty minor, shifting some money within the police special fund for purchasing equipment related to body-worn cameras and other miscellaneous items that are listed on the attachment.
Any questions for staff? Jared?
I don't have a question, but I'd like to make a motion.
Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to move ordinance number 2019-06-035, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 10 for FY 2018-2019 estimates be sent to the full council with a recommendation for approval.
Moved by Jared,
Second.
second by Eric. Any discussion? Mayor?
I would just like to add that the tornado damage estimates are just that, and they're not complete. So we probably will be getting additional expenses, including the cost of replacing the trees that were uprooted, which I'm hearing upwards of maybe 150 to 200. So we don't know the final count yet, though. So there was serious damage and more expenses to come.
Okay. Sharice?
I just have a question. When you make up the budget and everything, I was just thinking, because the tornado thing, is there anything in place or any kind of funds in place that for extraordinary circumstances, such as like a citywide blizzard that would, you know, wreak some havoc, or like the tornado and all the damage that something like that could do? Is there?
So we budget for snow and ice events, and it's pretty predictable. We'll have a certain amount of that every winter. But for example, something like what happened on May 26, you really can't plan for it. And
Exactly. That's why I was wondering if there was any
Yeah.
kind of budget for something that you can't plan for.
well, yeah, a budget's a plan, so it's things you're planning for. But you know, that is, as we discussed, part of the reason why we want to maintain a healthy fund balance, because, you know, thankfully, this event was bad, but could have been much worse. But, you know, there may be a time when we need to dip into those reserves to take care of
Yeah, it's
things.
just, you know, this is my first year going through a budget of any kind. So my question, I guess I'm wondering, because of the fact that I know that the weather is getting more extreme one way or the other, whether it's a very, very hot day or polar vortex or tornadoes falling down on people's lawns. And I know that there's going to be so much of that's going to fall right on city land as well. And I just didn't, it just occurred to me, actually, you know, is there that emergency fund of sorts for the extreme weather issues that could possibly affect the running of the city?
So the emergency fund is the fund balance. So if something really catastrophic happened, we would have to come back to the city council and ask you to amend the budget to let us spend that money that's in the fund balance.
Okay, so there is something like
Go
that.
ahead, Mayor.
And that's a really good question, actually. And I would add to the emergency fund, one of the changes, if you remember, we made in the public works structure was our environmental sustainability officer is now sustainability and resilience. And part of that resilience is planning for exactly the kinds of events you're talking about. So how to make sure we can respond, how do we build as much resilience into our facilities that we can. And part of the facilities study, one of the things we're asking the consultants to do is to help us plan for that as well. So anytime we make a change to a facility, upgrade, renovate, if eventually we build new, we need to be building in as much resilience as we possibly can, keeping in mind our changing climate. The same thing goes with the stormwater master plan update. There's a lot we can do with our infrastructure in terms of how we handle stormwater to help mitigate the impact of climate change. And the pavement assessment is the same way. And everything we look at in terms of our infrastructure, whether it's our green infrastructure, our surface under the street, above the street, we need to be building resilience into that, and that will help us deal with what we really don't know what's coming in the future, but we can bet it's not going to be exactly like the past.
Yeah,
and it's not just monetary, it's how do we make our infrastructure resilient as well.
I would just add a final point, which is just going back to the presentation that we made about the budget and a point that Elizabeth made at that time, which is right now the financial policy is that we will have a minimum of 15% of recurring expenses in the fund balance. And I think at that point, Elizabeth had mentioned that we really want to think about raising that minimum to 20 or 25%, and it's because it's our rainy day fund. And so just bear that in mind. That's also part of the reason why we changed some of the language in the financial policy to say that the 15% really is a minimum, it's not a target, because we really should be thinking about socking away more so that we'll be prepared if we continue
For a catastrophic event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Ordinance number 2019-06035 is being sent to council with recommendation for approval, correct? Okay. Second to last here, resolution number 2019-06-023R, resolution approving the capital improvement plan 2019, finance and public works.
So this resolution would just approve the capital improvement plan exactly as it was presented to you by Public Works staff.
Any questions of staff? Mary Alice.
So, Elizabeth, it's fortuitous that you are sitting in that seat right now, because my question actually isn't about Public Works, but rather policy and how things are financial procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So, in addition to talking about the staffing, I had also written about the RFP process, and I wanted to hear how the city handles the RFP process when you have a tentative budget, a certain amount that you are in line with. I remember when his name is escaping me, who used to be in charge of Public Works. Thank you.
Gray.
When Bill would send something out for RFP for resurfacing, for example, I remember he sent something out on north of North Vine, just south of where Cunningham starts. He said, oh, it came in way under what we thought it would come in, right? So is there a process in place that we can say, this is our target, we want to be able to, we don't want to go above and beyond this amount? What is that process?
I mean, sure, budget is a consideration when you evaluate proposals always, but sometimes, and I think the specific one you're thinking about, sometimes you will do an RFP for a project that has phases, and some of those may be occurring in the future, a year or more
Sure.
down the road. And so what we tend to do with those is we would write a contract that says that that additional phase only occurs once we authorize it, and we would never authorize that until the funds were budgeted.
So I guess perhaps I didn't ask my question clear enough. When we send something out for RFP, do we ever include kind of a cap Like, your bid should not exceed this?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but sometimes there's I guess sometimes I would fear that if we disclose our budget, that everybody's that's the price we're gonna get, and we're not gonna get a lower price.
Sure.
So the nature of an RFP is that we're issuing an RFP because price is not the only consideration, right? If price was the only consideration, we would issue an invitation to bid.
So,
Could I just, I don't mean to, I wanted to offer
yeah,
something
go
before
for
you go on. We have some standard language that's written into the CIP that I think is germane to this. And because the budget numbers, which maybe we would call them something slightly different, are the things that people focus on is, like, isn't that what something should cost? So this is our standard language from the CIP. Cost estimates and revenues are updated based on current information. It should be noted that most cost estimates are based on average costs per lineal foot, square yard, etc. Actual final project costs are not known until design is complete, bids are received, and construction has been completed. Circumstances unique to a particular project design may increase or decrease the projected costs. So, numbers that go into the CIP achieve a greater level of refinement as they go along. As it relates to, I don't know if you want us to get into any of the specifics of what has given rise to your question, but I can if you want me to. But I just wanted you to know that it's a process of refinement all the way up to getting proposals.
I suppose and I haven't been involved in big RFP projects, so I don't speak from experience in that regard. Whenever we would purchase large items, and we would purchase things that were $500,000, we would be given a couple of options, right? And our options would be, okay, well, we think this can do the job, or this is pretty good, or hey, if you really want to go above and beyond and be able to shoot a couple more birds with one stone, then you can do this. So 3 options or maybe even more. And I, by no means do I want City Council to micromanage any of this process, but I also think that it is prudent for us to think about the bottom line. And so that's why I keep harping on this, because it is a large amount of money. It's not $10,000. It's $150,000.
I think it would be good to give the we're talking about the facility study.
Correct.
And the $150,000 that's been a placeholder in the budget since 2012, so for 7 years. So it really was just placeholder. It was not based on, it was based on an estimate from 7 years ago for a very limited scope of projects. So it'd be good. Carol, why don't you go over how we got there?
Okay,
Because I think it'll address some of the concerns that were raised.
I'm going to pass around something that is something I put together today after Mary Alice circulated her question. And this is just me working quickly. There was a draft scope that was used to get the estimate in 2012, which was then brought forward over the years. And then there was the final scope of the RFP for the facilities master plan. And so there's a couple of things I just want to point out. This is rather dense text, so I don't expect you to take it all in as we're sitting here. One is that all the major buildings were in the draft scope. All the buildings were in the final scope. What is different, if you read through the kind of dense text there, what stands out is that there was what we have gotten even already from Canon Design includes cost estimating. In the original, so we have actionable items from our phase 1 work because that told us what the short-term priorities were. In the other proposal, there wouldn't be any cost estimating done until there had been work. Until there had been a consensus reached about what the master plan preferences were, which meant that cost was not going to be factored in at all. So that's a lot more upfront work that is extremely useful to the city in setting priorities and developing a master plan. That's a notable exception. Another notable exception is the degree to which in interviewing staff and in developing the options that it would be that there would be a more integrated thought given to not just like how many employees do you have and how much space do they take up and how many do you think you're going to have in the future, but really about adjacencies, about how people work together, how we interact with the public, new ways of work, and how that would evolve over time. And so the level of sophistication, and this was expected, this was written into the final scope of work, we advanced the level of sophistication significantly from what the original scope was. And so finally, I think that the last thing in terms of deliverables was that we would have something that would have short-term, medium-term, and long-term actionable items, whereas in the original it was really just, well, here's your master plan with a set of priorities, but not as useful for us, particularly in the context we're in right now, which is where we're going to have to make a lot of choices about what to do first and then next and next. So that has driven it to I think the mayor's choice of words was the best, which the $150,000 was not intended, and it's on us not to have made that more clear. It was a placeholder. It was not intended as a budget.
Eric.
So I'm looking at another aspect of this from a couple of different perspectives. I remember well when the state put in place a procurement policy at the university, which was ridiculous. It was an attempt to prevent corruption, but what it really prevented was progress in many instances, because it would just hamstring researchers who knew exactly who could provide the services or the equipment they needed. So fortunately, that's been relaxed. A lot of people talk to Naomi about that. But on the other hand, there was, a real. It was based on a real concern, and it was based on, frankly, it was based on experience with an incredibly corrupt governor. So but many details was misplaced. So I want you to know that I understand all the aspects. I'm appreciative, I'm sensitive to all the aspects of this. And so in that context, I'd like to ask, do we have a policy of when we go out for RFP as opposed to adopting a less formal process, as was really done with Canon?
Yes, we have purchasing policies that that talk about, they all fit within the scope of what the city code permits, of course, and they talk about at certain dollar thresholds what are the requirements. And generally at $10,000, we require either a request for proposals or a formal bid process.
So I'm trying to figure out how the facilities study fit into that.
There's different kinds of procurements. So one is for people to bid, an invitation to bid, and then you can rack and stack according to whatever the parameters, but typically you would take low price. This was a qualifications-based selection. So we decided who we wanted before we talked price.
Because they were uniquely qualified?
I don't want to say they're uniquely qualified in the country. They're certainly the most qualified of the people who bid.
And we had an internal selection committee evaluating the different bids.
Okay.
So, Mr. Jacobson, typically with professional services, so services provided by professional engineers, planners, architects, folks like Canon Design, we follow the Qualifications-Based Selection Act. So it's a state act that requires that basically we would ask for the firms to submit proposals based upon the criteria that we've developed, and then we go through the selection based upon qualifications. Then we negotiate price after the fact. That's very much different than, say, like the Vine Street project that you were talking about, Ms. Wu, where those are invitation to bid projects for contractual services. So in those cases, we submit basically release a set of bid documents. The contractor submits a bid, and then we select based upon low bid. So there's a difference between professional services and contractual services.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and that's, you know, exactly the kind of distinction that we needed to be made for university procurement also.
Right.
Okay.
And much of the time, the reason for that is when you do a contractual bid, say for a road project, you'll have everything will be itemized. But when you do a professional service, you don't really know exactly every single component.
Sure.
You then negotiate a scope to get that component. And then with that scope comes a fee. And if you can't come to an agreement with the firm that's selected, then you move to the second firm. Does that make sense?
Makes perfectly good sense.
Okay.
Thank you. And if all of that was explained to me before, I apologize for being inattentive, but thank you.
Okay.
Bill?
Yeah, thanks for this additional information and also for the opportunity to look at the documents. If we want to see the RFP and their response to RFP, we can do that. But this, I think, summarizes what my questions were. I was just wondering if you had any other detailed memos in response to anticipated questions we forgot to ask.
I just wait for Mary Alice to send an email, and then I get right to work. No, I don't have any more detailed information.
But we're very much looking forward to phase 2 of this, because that's where the consultants will be here meeting with, I think, up to 16 different focus groups with employees. And perhaps even the city council will have an opportunity for input too.
Well, and I think some of our commission members might want to participate as well. I was talking to the Sustainability Advisory Commission, and some of them would like to participate too. So broad participation, instead of what was intended in the original scope was talking to departments in isolation, which is exactly what we want to get away from.
And again, it's people-focused. It's not just building-focused, because obviously we're not going to build a bunch of new buildings, but it's how are we using our existing facilities and how can we use them more effectively and provide the best possible work environment for our employees.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we send resolution number 2019-06-023R, resolution approving the capital improvement plan for 2019 forward to the full council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Jared, second by Bill. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution number 2019-06-023R has been sent to the full council with recommendations for approval. Thank you. Okay, last, resolution number 2019-06-024R, resolution adopting financial policies 2019 finance.
So this resolution would approve the financial policies as we discussed them. At the time, we talked about the Vehicle and Equipment Replacement Fund. So it does include the changes that Carol mentioned earlier in the language about the 15% fund balance and the minimum versus a target. And it also includes changes related to the funding recommendations for VRF that were discussed on that evening. So these are the council's policies that set the broad parameters for how we budget.
Okay, any questions for staff?
Questions? I don't know.
Mary Alice.
I don't know if I'd call it a question, and it's funny because we've gone completely bottom up from my email. So I think that out of all the things that we discussed with the budget, I think this is the one that's really kind of kept me up at night. And the reason it's kept me up at night is because by no means do I want the city to be worse off after we all leave. I don't know if any of us will be here in 12 years. And I mean no disrespect to anybody, please. But I really, I don't want to set the city up to have to borrow money in order to meet the obligations that we are cognizant of right now. And so, I mean, this is what our state government has been doing for eons. I'm not saying it's on that level by any means. It's not. But our state has not been funding the pension system, and that is causing a crisis. So this is a very minuscule item compared to that in terms of impact. At the same time, the estimate was $10 million over three $3 million loans in the 2030s. So there's two things here, two parts that I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in terms of the proposed changes to the VERF policy. Number one is that we would no longer be backfilling the VERF pool based on the underfunding since 2015. So I think that we gave it approximately $120,000 last year, just off the top of the general fund to try and pay it back. The second piece, so that would go away under this proposed policy. The second piece is that the operating budgets that are responsible where the equipment actually comes out of, so we'll just use the fire department because they have expensive equipment. The fire department may be the most expensive equipment in the city. So every year, the fire department has a certain number of assets that they have, and the replacement cost and the replacement cycle for them is calculated, probably not on Excel, but, on some kind of system. And it's like, here's the bottom line. You need to set aside, in order to replace this equipment, you need to set aside X number of dollars. If I would summarize that. Did I summarize that correctly, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that said, there's a calculation that goes into not only how much do we predict that these will cost us to replace and the life cycle, but also the percentage that we're going to use in order to put that money away, to identify that money. And that's the piece that I kind of want to focus on right now. So the proposal in this finance policy change is to decrease that from 90% to 70%. And as I said in my email, and I'll just repeat for the general public, I realize that we are too late in the budget season to go backwards and say, okay, now you guys have to put more money into you have to cut more from your budget and make up that 20% difference. But I do think that it is feasible for us to go back to the policy of 90% annual charge for equipment. And so basically my compromise is this. I want to try and not set up the city for future items that they're going to have to borrow money from. And the only way I can see that is to either pay back the VERF, which we know we can't do because we don't have the money to do that. But we can minimize it. And what I'm saying in terms of minimization is to not cut back on the percentage that we are putting away from all of our operating budget. So I suppose my proposal would be to only change the amount that we are taking off the top from the general. And so that I don't think is actually, I'm trying to look in here. So right now under proposed changes you have two items. One is the percentage that's taken out of the operating budgets, and two is the long-term borrowing to finance equipment purchases during periods when the fund balance would fall below 10%. And so I guess what I'm saying is number one would be in effect for 1 year and then revert back to the older policy. And number two, we'll have to, right? That'll be the policy, is that we will have to at some point take out a loan. So, I mean, those are my thoughts. Hopefully summarized succinctly, perhaps not.
Can I say something, and then I'm sure Elizabeth wants to address this. If your concern is that you want to avoid the city having to borrow money in the future, we have to borrow money in the future. It's really just a question of for what. And With the proposal that we have, we can sort of project out that, in 10 years or so, we might have to take out this series of loans. But the reason why we're collecting all this information about our the state of our major asset types, the physical condition of the pavement, of the storm water, the stormwater is in a separate fund, but of the pavement and the facilities, is that we know that we're going to have to borrow money to address the many items of deferred maintenance. So this time next year, we'll have a better sense of how far we've come, and we'll also have a sense of what's facing us with those other major asset types, because the vehicles are just another asset type. We'll have a sense of how we're going to tackle that, and not giving us the flexibility with the VERF and saying, no, we're going to definitely fund vehicles and sort of maybe borrow money for these other things. You can have more flexibility if we don't lock down so hard on the VERF policy and agree to fund that 100% while knowing we have to borrow for these other asset types. We just don't know how much yet. Do you follow what I'm saying?
I do. I would say that we have to borrow wisely, and absolutely we're not going to be able to do the long list of repairs and long list of infrastructure upgrades that obviously need to happen without borrowing some money to cover those costs. I get that. I don't have any, I don't think we're going to get out of here without borrowing money, but we can minimize that. And certainly, if I don't want to put anything in place that we cement in stone that we are underfunding VERF permanently, because that's what this does. And I say that with a caveat, and that caveat is every year we get changes to policies. And so after that evaluation of the facilities, if it does make more sense to underfund VERF and put some money aside for a capital fund, maybe that's what we do. But I don't want to walk into that with that expectation. This is what we're going to do. And so that is the reason why I would prefer, if we know we need to set this money aside right now, we know roughly that a ladder truck is what, $1.3 million, somewhere around there?
Close to that.
Right? We know that's the cost. I mean, that's the cost right now, and in 10 years, it's going to be more. It's only going to go up. They're all custom made. That's right. So that's why I'm saying, okay, we have an opportunity right now to say, this is only temporary. If you want to come back next year and say, this is what we think needs to happen in terms of, here's all the things that we need to do. This is what our consultants have told us in terms of, these are items that really have to be done very soon. Otherwise, your building's going to fall down around you. We can take a broader look at that. It's a bigger picture. But right now, I don't want to set the stage for we're definitely going to underfund VERF.
I do want to make sure that we understand that there will be a trade-off. So if we're funding VERF at 70% in this proposed budget, we will have to make up in next year's budget, where we already plan to probably make $500,000 in cuts, we'll have to make up the difference between 70 and 90%, which is not insubstantial. It's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this. But.
And that's additional people and services.
Eric.
Yeah, let's revisit this idea of the borrowing earlier in the budget cycle next year, please. I think that a reasonable rule about borrowing is, of course, one should borrow to invest in durable assets in buildings. As a general rule, one should not borrow to cover recurring costs. You've gotten into trouble. And I would put the vehicles in the category of recurring costs and say that it's not such a good idea to borrow for them. But as Mary Alice noted, it's late in the day for this year to have a lengthy conversation about that. But let's look at this earlier, please, in the in next year's budget cycle.
Therese?
I just want to know, with this, in particularly with the VERF, because I would think that that would fall also under some kind of emergency state emergency funds, possibly, or anything to infrastructure, to maintain infrastructure, that kind of stuff. Are we getting any state funds or anything that would come in to help with that cost at all?
No, and I wouldn't count on getting that in the future.
I mean, no, because I don't know anything. I'll put it on the table. I don't know anything about how this runs, but I know that statewide, the budget and finances and how things have been have not been good, to say the least. So I didn't know if the city of Urbana has been missing out because of the fact that people in Springfield don't know what they're doing, or if they're missing out on some monies that they probably would have been getting added to a budget that could assist with any of this.
No, I think if we thought there was money we should have been getting, we would have been very vocal about trying to get it.
Okay.
For example, the city did send a list of capital bill requests to Springfield, and a very, very small fraction of those we think have been funded in the capital bill.
Okay.
A fraction.
Because I
of what
know
we
that
asked
this,
for,
the state does give some monies for some things, and just
Well,
looking at everything, not just the VERF, but just, the capital improvements and everything is like, oh.
Well, it's the first time a capital bill has been passed in, 10 years? So, something
Like I said, some folks don't know what they're doing. So, okay.
So, yeah, we're grateful for the allocation, but it's infrastructure projects.
Okay. It's for, okay.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, I was a little confused about the VERF too, but I discussed it a little bit before the meeting with Elizabeth, and it seems to me like it's more like the borrowing is just to even out the fund balance a little bit more in the VERF, because a lot of the expenses, the larger expenses, are piled up. Remember that graph showed several years in a row where you'd have big expenses, and then several years where there's low expenses. So in the low years, you'd have extra money in the VERF, and in the high years, you'd overspend it. And by setting up the credit or the borrowing, it would help kind of even that out and make it a little bit more predictable. And I mean, we're still going to spend the same amount of money on the equipment, and you're still going to bill it to the departments that need to be billed for it. So that won't change, right? The police will still pay for will still show up in their budget for their police cars and everything.
Right, sure. I mean, part of the beauty of doing it this way is that it's a mechanism where we create kind of a stable budget in the general operating fund, because they pay those annual fees, but the big fluctuations happen in the VERF. So yes, they have to pay to make it work. I think the question is how much.
Yeah, and I think the timing issue is what kind of helps me understand how you could fund it at 90% and never. I mean, you said you ran the simulation for 50 years and you never had to, never went totally it never was real bad.
Right. Well, we ran it out for 40 or 50 years. The charts you saw in the report, I think, were 20 years, because it gets really hard to look at when you have all those years on it. But we wanted to be confident that it was going to prove out over a very long period of time. And we have a couple of pieces of equipment that maybe have very long lives, like I want to say nothing more than 30 for sure, but you definitely want to run it out at least as long as the longest cycle of a piece of equipment.
And I think some of it is that we have this inflation built into the adjusted price of the equipment, so you're putting money away for an inflated price. But under the borrowing scenario, you're actually buying things at today's price, so it might be kind of a future value, present value thing too that helps the 90% make it work. I don't know. I don't understand how it works, but if it works, I'm okay with it.
I think part of why, and we talked about this, part of why it works is that we're funding in advance of the purchase. So Chuck's $1.25 million ladder truck, he's not paying for it after we buy it, but he's paying, I can't remember what the life is, 15, 20 years. He's paying each year in advance, and that money's not needed until the end. So that's part of what makes it work. Yeah.
Jared?
Mary Alice, I just wanted to make one comment to you based on your email. And one of the things that I think, I don't know if it's just lost in perspective or not to you or what, but you know, we're making a resolution amending previous resolutions where we previously set financial priorities, and we will be able to do that again as many times, or future councils will be able to do that as many times as they want. So as I understand the ordinance, the way that it's written, I don't think that adopting these financial policies where there's no, and therefore we shall never amend this ever again, no future councils shall ever change this at the end of it, so it will be revisited. And I understand all the points that everyone's making about, you know, the strategy, and I think we're going to have to continue to think critically about it as we go forward. But you just, when I was reading what you were saying, you know, it just made it seem like there was a totality and an end to it that was like so far beyond that we were going to be affecting council down 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when there'll be a lot of chances to continue looking at strategies so they not pan out.
Rebuttal.
Just a comment to you.
So I think I think the thing that took me aback from this resolution is basically, let me go back to where it is here. Basically, the policy, and Carol and Diane, please correct me if I'm wrong, the policy, the financial policies is what the finance department and all of the department heads use to create their budgets in the future. And it is really an expectation of how the department heads and the city staff members will develop the budget in the future. So my purpose, absolutely, I think that things can change and things get amended over the years and so forth, but is to set that expectation that the VERF needs to be funded at level X, so that when the budget is developed next year, we don't continue down the hole of, we funded it at 70% last year, we're going to continue funding it at 70%. You get behind the ball here. So if we are able to set this is our expectation, then when the budget is developed, that's what is used. Does that make sense?
Can I, you're absolutely right. But as we sit here, I don't want to lose track of what the mayor said, which is what we had said in our budget presentations, which is we have wrung the efficiency out of the government as near as we can tell, at least in any major way. And so in the future, we're going to be, the reductions that we make in recurring expenses are going to impact services to residents. So as we sit here right now, we're thinking, well, you know, you're just going to have to put aside more money for the VERF, and that's gonna mean that we have to make further reductions. And it's kind of abstract right now. It's going to become a year from now very specific and perhaps very painful. So, I mean, what I would like is to absolutely take note of your concern and revisit it a year from now, and when we've made the proposals to get us to $500,000 or whatever we determine at the time we need to reduce in recurring expenses, maybe you'll get a sense of how much deeper that might, how much more painful that would be at that time when we have to cut another couple $100,000 in order to comply with this policy. Because right now, it's very abstract, you know, well, we need to fund it, and so, you know, you're just going to have to make those reductions, when, in fact, that's when you actually implement it or even make proposals, it's real stuff. Because what we did this year was hard, and
it was agonizing.
And it will be more so next year.
But we also have to keep in mind, we'll have a much better idea next year of what the, if we're looking at a change in the income tax structure, plus some of the revenues from these revenue-enhancing bills that were passed in the legislature this year. So we'll have a better idea of what our revenue picture looks like next year as well.
Jared?
Just one other broad-faced question for you, Elizabeth, about the policy from 90 to 70%. If we didn't have to do it, would we be doing it? If this wasn't, Carol, I guess you can answer that too. If we didn't have to do it, would this be our policy?
Well, from my perspective, I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't think we had to do it.
Okay. That's what I thought. I mean, this is kind of we're doing it because we really don't feel like we have a better choice to make a sound financial decision going forward, correct?
I think that's a fair statement.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that it's not a like, oh, this is good. It's a, this is bad, but this is what we can do to mediate it.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd say it's bad either. It just wouldn't, it wouldn't be my first choice.
Not our, okay. Thank you.
Do we have a motion? Anybody, anywhere? Bill?
Yeah, I move to send resolution number 2019-06-024R, resolution adopting financial policies to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved by Bill, seconded by Jared. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Yes.
Okay, Mary Alice goes on record as opposed. So resolution number 2019-06-024R has been sent to the full council with recommendation for approval. With that, our meeting is adjourned.